They are.
Darts at
Too many calls.
All right, good to see you, gentlemen. Welcome. Good to see you.
Are they here all week? With COVID, I would like to
Let's see.
And the only time I got
Who do we have?
so anyway, so I go every day. Wear my mask all day long. And it's so loud. What are you getting? No. Pfizer, Moderna. Okay, that's I can't say no. You have such.
Good morning, Rotary. Fellow Rotarians, great to be here on Holy Thursday. Beautiful day today. And to get us started, we could bring our Sergeant at Arms, Judge Whitney, with our invitation.
Good morning, Irving Sunrise Rotary Club. What a great day to be a Rotarian. We've got a beautiful sunrise coming up, and it's going to be a great day. But this morning, I'd like to share with you from Proverbs 21:26. I'll back away from that. The righteous yields and spares not. And with that, I'd like to tell you about a baseball coach named Bob Hurley. He was a high school baseball coach, and he was very successful. He had won 570 games to 60 losses, 15 state championships, and a national championship. But he was most proud of his.
Oh, I'm in class today.
His students were on the honor said, if you can't study and do well in your studies, you're no good on the baseball field. And he was recruited by several people to move from where he was, but he put his heart and soul into his players. And like I said, if a player wasn't doing well in his studies, he didn't play. But if a player was actually struggling, well, then he would end up having dinner at the coach's house and tutor. And so, with his love for his students, his desire for them to do well, all but one of his students went to college, and over 60% of his students left college with a degree. Let us pray. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the way that it guides and directs us in everything we do and say. Father, we thank you for how alive your word is today. And Father, just pray that you will go with this Rotary Club as we strive to find those that are less fortunate in and around our area. But Father, thank you for what we're carrying through around the world to help others. Father, we pray that we'll continue to strive to give our time and our money for those that are less fortunate. Father, we thank you for our program this morning. Pray that we will be very attentive and take away from this something that will help us in not only today, but in the future. Father, we pray for those that are not here this morning. We pray that you'll guide and direct them, bring them back to us. We pray these things in Jesus' holy name. Amen. And at this time, Reverend Paul will lead us in the pledge.
Please stand and join me on honoring our flag, our veterans, and all deployed service members. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, any announcements this morning? Do we have any visitors? Oh, Rick, y'all have some visitors.
Sorry about that. Good morning, everybody. I want to introduce future Rotarians and my kids. This is Lindsay, Ben, and Jack. They're on spring break from Las Vegas and got up early, amazingly without too much trouble, to join us today. So thanks for coming, guys.
Welcome.
Spring break and he gets you up for 7 o'clock. That's cruel and unusual punishment. Any announcements? All is well. Anything from the back? Yes. Doc, what do you have?
So just real quick, I've got your dues coming out, and I want to thank the members who are eating. We've adjusted the price a little bit to keep us at the club here until we make a final decision. So don't be shocked when you see a slight increase. The rest of you, it's going to be the same as it's been. Thanks.
Okay, anything else?
Any news on Bill?
Anyone have any news on Bill Hooten?
What's up with Bill?
Bill has E. coli. Yeah. And not COVID, but yeah. And
Sharon Johnson reported yesterday that he's doing better and expected to get better. She's in touch with, I believe it's his secretary, and she passed that on to us. It's good news. It's just going to take some time.
thank you, Jeff. Okay.
Another brief news about the RILA Cindy Porter reports that the RILA interviews are going to be conducted on April the 9th, Friday. So we have, that's the Nivens High School, and they already have 6 to 7 kids that have applied at this point. So we should have a good opportunity there too. Now the challenge there is it looks like they're all girls that are applying, and we need to get a girl and a boy. So if you happen to know any young men that are juniors, they have to be juniors in high school, and they can be eligible for this RILA scholarships and maybe go to whatever. Questions about RILA? The people who are going to be doing interviews are, of course, Cindy Porter, Roderick, Robin, and Larry Leon, and myself. So I think that covers it, Larry, usually. That should be fine. But if you have a passion for that, let us know. We should be able to get you next one.
Are we doing 2 spots?
2 spots this year, yes, sir, instead of the typical 4. Yes, sir?
Oh, I don't have a question. I was going to just make an announcement.
Oh, another announcement. There you go.
Don't knock the chair over again. I did want to let you know that another activity that we all did this week was go to Texas A&M last weekend. I've been there. I've driven past it, believe it or not, but not visited the campus. And I got to tell you, this is an impressive place. And that's a lot coming from a Red Raider. So I hope that they enjoyed the tour, but I just wanted to give a shout out to any actors that might be in the room. They were really hospitable, and it was a great opportunity to see a really awesome university. So that's my announcement.
Yeah. Absolutely, fine university for sure. So we could all be, did you guys get a chance to go to the museum there for Dr. Bush?
We did not have time for that.
That's very impressive as well. Of course, the lonely Mississippi wasn't alone. Judge Newton wasn't alone, and there was a rumor that you visited the Dixie Chicken.
That's true.
Yeah. So a few arrests, no convictions, right? So that's good.
I never felt so old.
Very good. Any other announcements? Oh, there's Cindy Porter. Cindy, I asked about RILA already, so we got that covered. Thank you. Okay. Well, we'll start with our program today. If I can invite Larry Leon to come to the podium and introduce our speaker.
Good morning, Rotarians.
Morning.
Happy day today. It's Thursday. We're really fortunate to have Jay Maymi. Jay is from Manhattan, Spanish Harlem. Jay is CEO. He's an entrepreneur, maverick, noted author. He's a national speaker, sales psychology expert, and a radio talk show host from KLIF 570 Dallas. Jay is he's married and has three children, 2 boys and 1 girl. One of the boys is a U.S. Marine. A little bit about what Jay's going to speak about today. The title is Survive and Thrive Enterprises, How to Become Immortal and Stand Out in the Crowd. Let me tell you a little bit more about Jay. There's an advantage to growing up in a humble setting with meager means. The reality of your circumstances can either humble you into mediocrity or extract you from becoming, from you, burning desire to excel and rise above. My story is one of the latter. So Jay's going to come and tell us a little bit about his story. Let's give him a hand, guys.
Morning. In fact, I might just well just stay up here. Hey, kudos to having your 3 kids up here so early in the morning. My son's 11 years old, and if I ever thought about getting one this early on a day off, he probably would run away. I wouldn't see him after a while. But I want to share with you a story that really starts off about 52 years ago. There was a Spanish couple that came from Puerto Rico to New York. They settled in Spanish Harlem. How many of you know Spanish Harlem or have heard of Spanish Harlem, like the song, There's a Rose in Spanish Harlem? That's where I grew up, and so about 52 years ago, the Spanish couple came from Puerto Rico, a young couple. They had just gotten here, and the mom had trouble having children. She had 3 miscarriages. She had 1 child, but along the way she had 3 miscarriages, and so it was a pretty difficult time back in the late 60s. But this couple was so intent on having children that they decided they were going to adopt. And so the mom and the dad went ahead and put their name in the, to have up for adoption. Back in those days, you could put your name on a list of paper, and if a child popped up for adoption, you get a phone call, and they would call you up and say, "Come pick up your package." And you just show up. These days, it's a whole different ballgame. So down there at that time, they went down at the time the father was working 3 jobs, the mother was working in the factory. Story, not a lot of education, so they had to do the grunt work. But they got a phone call from the agency. The agency said to go down. Oops. So the agency called them up and said, "Hey, we've got someone here. We've got a baby here for you to want to pick up." So they got excited about it. After 3 miscarriages, they got excited about it. When they got down to the agency director said, "Look, we've got something to share with you. This is going to be a package deal. You're going to have to buy one and get one free because they're twins." So it's a BOGO deal. Turns out that they could have easily said no. That couple could have said, "Listen, economically, we cannot afford to have 2. We were on the list for 1. But they thought at the time, and they said, God would provide, and they decided how could they separate these twin boys, and they never thought they would do that. So they ended up that day walking home, going back home with twins. So the mother had to stop working to take care of the twins. The father picked up another job, and a tough job, working in the cleaners. In the summertime, if you've ever been to New York, it's hazy, it's hot, it's humid, and he worked in the dry cleaners in the back, pressing clothes, no air conditioning back in the 60s. But he did what he had to do, and he gave, both of them decided to raise these 2 children, and the struggle was real for this couple, imagining having to raise 2 boys. During those days, economically challenging times for them. But I gotta tell you, the guy who's standing before you today is the guy who's a product of that adoption. Me and my twin brother Joe were those 2 boys that got adopted that day. So I can tell you that I always open up my talk giving kudos to my parents. My father's passed away. He served in the Army Corps in the Korean War. And so my mom, still alive, she's 88 years old. So I always give them kudos because if it wasn't for them to make a decision to adopt both of us, they could have easily said 1. I wouldn't be here today, wouldn't have the experiences that I've had growing up in those economically challenging times, but the story that I shared today would have never happened. So I'm appreciative of that experience. But that really taught me a lot. Just take this here. That really taught me a lot back in those days because, sometimes you can live in a very economically wonderful area and have all the wonderful things that can come for you, and that's great. But sometimes the opposite really happens for a lot of us. So I remember when I was 13 years old, growing up in Spanish Harlem, I didn't have we wanted the latest sneakers and the jeans and the things that you would want when you were a kid to be cool like the other kids. But I didn't have an opportunity to do that. I certainly couldn't ask my father. Couldn't ask my mother to buy us a pair of sneakers that were expensive. So the best blessings I ever got was the ability to go out and learn how to make money on my own. And when I was 13 years old, since we lived right across the street from Central Park, up the block from Central Park, every Saturday and Sunday you would have those guys playing softball. And the cool thing about those guys playing softball in Central Park on Saturdays and Sundays was they would leave bottles and cans on the ground. Now, if you're an entrepreneurially minded person like me and my brother, by necessity, we had to figure out ways to make money. If we wanted the latest pair of sneakers and the jeans, we had to figure out ways to make money at 13 years old. So we would go on Saturdays and Sundays with a shopping cart and pick up the bottles and the cans on the ground. And here's my first lesson. My first lesson that me and my brother learned was that how people could not see opportunity when it's right on the ground. And when most people saw poop, we saw profit. We saw a nickel on the ground. And we figured, how can people walk by? These are nickels. But they didn't see nickels, they didn't see 5 cents, they saw an empty bottle, an empty can. So we thought this is the goal. We could pick up those bottles and cans and trade them in for a nickel, and that's how we were able to end up buying our sneakers and our jeans and the things that we wanted. But what it did for me was it awoke in me an entrepreneurial spirit that I never knew that I had until that opportunity. I went on to do taxes as a 16-year-old. I did taxes. You know, back in those days, you could fill out a tax preparer course, send it out to the IRS. They send you back a certificate that said you could do taxes. So I would do taxes for the local community, simple returns, 10, 40 easies. But that continued to develop in me an entrepreneurial spirit. And from there, I went on to do personal training, developed my own personal training company when I was 18, 19 years old. And then I went to college. I got a double major in psychology and consumer behavioral sciences. But by the time I got to college at Pace University, I had already learned all these academical things in the field. I had learned them in the trenches. I had learned how to deal with people. I had learned how people think and what are the things that matter most to people. So by the time I graduated and I was 22 years old, with that 24 with the masters, I had already done most of the stuff I learned in the books. I had already done in the field, learning from experiences. And then I went on to become an actor. I did some work in Hollywood. I did some work on Broadway. Anybody ever seen the film City Hall with Al Pacino and John Cusack? Or Carlito's Way? I was in those films. I was in a film called 6 Degrees of Separation with John Sutherland and Will Smith. I was the guy in the roller skates. If you blink, you miss me. That was my first small part, so make sure you kind of slow it down if you get a chance to see that movie. That's me in the roller skates on 4th Street in the Village. So we did a bunch of that, and then I got involved in real estate. And then from real estate, I realized, okay, there is not much I'm going to do in the acting world because it's very, very difficult. So I figured to get into real estate. And from real estate, I got involved in financial services, and I've been doing that work since 1992. But along the way, I decided to get involved in speaking and working with people on a leadership level and sales development level. But here's what happened. Here's where today I was going to do a talk on how to become memorable, which is very important if you're in business. If you're in anything that requires you to be memorable, you have to have things that you do that people remember you long after you leave the room. And yesterday I was on a talk show and I was talking to the host about interviewing and how people who go on interviews, those that are looking for a job, they don't do the things that make themselves memorable. So after a while, these interviewers, it's just one resume after another, and you're no different than the person who came there before. And that's the talk that I was going to do today. But then I started to think about the last 6 or 7 talks I've done. I've noticed a pattern that I said I need to put a pause button on the talk about being memorable because I'm seeing other things that are happening here, especially coming after the pandemic, we're recovering, and just the mood of people is very, very different than it was 12 months ago. So I said, let me change course here. Let me pivot a little bit on one of my talks and base it off one of my books that I wrote about 2 years ago. It was one of my best-selling books, and now more than ever, I think is where people are. And boy, what was I right? Listening to that instinct that I had, what was I right? It's a book that I wrote about 4 years ago, published 2 years ago. But here's what I did. Me and my brother were sitting around. My brother's a big sales manager for Coldwell Banker and Keller Williams back in New York. And so we were thinking, and we were kind of wondering, why is it that people who have great potential, great ambition, they want to do something, they want to be somebody, what is it that holds people back? Because after a while, if you've got enough training, enough resources, if you're a leader, if you're a manager, if you're something that involves me, if you're a parent, anything that requires you to be at a performance level that benefits others, we go through enough training, enough inspiration, we go through enough resources, we have access to so many things today, but why is it that people still fall short? What's holding people back? And I was actually having that conversation with him as he was considering what's holding his real estate agents back. And I thought about my own organization. What is holding people back? We give them enough. There's no shortage of ways for a person to get better. So why is it that people are still struggling? And then I took a look at my own life. I said, what am I struggling with? What is it that I'm dealing with that I know that I could do better? I could be a better business leader. I could be a better father. I could be a better husband. I could be a better friend. What's holding me back? Because all the wonderful books about all these other things that I've written about is nice. But what am I dealing with that I need to get straightened out right away? You know what I realized immediately was I was dealing with my own head trash. I call it head trash because as I sort of look back at my background in psychology and behavioral sciences, I have forgotten that there's things that we deal with that hold us back. It's the things that nobody wants to talk about. So when I wrote this book called Battling Invisible Enemies, I wrote the book for myself. It's sort of like I made a note to myself, talking to myself about, okay, so what's bugging you? What's bothering you? What is it that's holding you back from getting to the next level of who you need to be and perform at? And I realized that it's so easy to get caught up in battles that I call battling invisible enemies. Now, we all deal with invisible enemies on a spiritual level, I believe. But there's some enemies that we also deal with that don't fight fair. They kick you when you're down. You can't see them, you can't smell them. You don't even know when they're around. And they come at you at your worst moment, but they also come at you when you are your best moments. So I wrote this book called Battling Invisible Enemies to deal with the enemies of what I call fear, doubt, disbelief, worry, stress, which often lead to discouragement, disappointment, and where people oftentimes land at, and that's depression. Not clinically depressed, that's a whole other ballgame, but a place where you have to, you struggle with finding out what is it that I need to do because I'm stuck in this place. So let me show you what I mean. I call it the downward spiral. And well, I tell you what, if you find yourself, and here's the problem, you might say to yourself, you know, I've never struggled with any of these things. And I don't think you'd be very honest. Because everybody struggles with this, if you're honest. You know, sometimes you get up in the morning, and this morning was one of those mornings. You get up in the mornings and you're minding your business. And all of a sudden you find that you're in a sort of this mental battle. These fiery darts wake you up, and you're having your breakfast, you're doing what you're doing, but there's some turmoil already starting, and you can't figure out where did this thing come from. And you start to battle with these thoughts that can get you discouraged and disappointed. All of a sudden, the levels of anxiety increase and pressure. And before you know it, 1 hour into it, you're in the battle. And I'm going to promise you this, too many skirmishes and too many battles oftentimes will lead you to losing the war. There's only so many battles you can fight every day. There's only so many skirmishes you can deal with every day. Before at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, or at the end of the month, you end up having a terrible loss. I can promise you there's people that we've known, we've heard of, that have had battles that they've lost. So one of the things I'll share with you is how do you identify somebody who's in a battle, because you can save their lives. I can't tell you how many folks over the course of the last year, 2 years, and since I started to have these talks, and people who read the books, they've given the books away to somebody who has confessed to them that this book came at the right time in my life because I was in a really bad place. And this was interesting from a psychological standpoint. When I used to do men's ministry, I used to do prison ministry. You never know who's in the bad place, because people don't walk around showing in their faces that they're in a bad place. Now, a bad place may not mean a very dangerous place, but a bad place is a place where somebody is struggling with something that if it takes a hold of them, it could really become catastrophic. And I believe that it's our responsibility sometimes to look out for each other. And as I was talking to my brother that day about these challenges, I said, let's just forget about sales. Let's forget about leadership. Let's just talk about human beings. Let's talk about how can I help somebody? How can I identify in somebody where they may be, what kind of struggles they may be, what kind of battles they may be in, that I can help them get out of it. Or if I'm in a battle myself, what can I do so I can get out of this battle? Because I promise you, one of the things I write about in the book is if you want to win the battle, then don't get into it in the first place. So let me share with you what I mean about the battles. Here's how quickly we can find ourselves in a situation that is not very good. We end up first, and I call it the downward spiral. I mean, all it takes is one skirmish to lead to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And just like that, we find ourselves in a place where we're discouraged and depressed. And it starts off oftentimes with pressure. I don't know about you, but I battle with the yes problem. How many of you say yes more than you need to? You say yes more than you need to. So when I was sitting down looking at my own thoughts and looking at myself, I said, how do I end up here? Because I make more promises than I can keep. There's something about high achievers, there's something about us, people that are ambitious, or those that want to please others, that we're very quick to say yes, way too many times. The minute you say yes to something or someone, here's what happens. You end up saying no to something else that really matters. But when you say yes to something or commit to something that you already know, I probably shouldn't have said yes to that. I shouldn't have made a commitment to that project. I shouldn't say yes this to my wife. I shouldn't promise my kids that I was going to do that when I already know I'm not going to fall, I'm not going to make that promise come through. I'm probably going to have a hard time making that commitment come to pass. You've just created undue pressure. Who's ever been there? We know what that's at. We know. And boy, I tell you, that pressure, where does that pressure leads to? It leads to the stress that now you know I've got to make that happen. I've got to come through. I gave my word. I made a commitment. Now I've got pressure. Pressure leads to stress. Overwhelming stress leads to anxiety. You know what happens when you struggle with anxiety? Sometimes unmanaged anxiety leads you to have a need for prescription for medication. How many of you know people that because their anxiety levels are so high, they have to go on medication? Because the anxiety is too high. Well, that's backed up by stress. That's backed up by pressure. When your anxiety is too high, here's what happens. Now you start to worry. People say, why do I worry so much? Well, look what happened. The worry came from anxiety, it came from stress, and it came from pressure. And all of a sudden, you're in a battle. And now you're trying to figure out how to get out of this thing. You know what happens when you get from worry, too much worry, it's the beginning of fear. If you think about where fear comes from, oftentimes fear comes from a place where you're worrying about something that is overwhelming you. Now you get into a crippling place of fear. Well, I tell you, in the book, one of the things I talked about, that's just the first round. From fear, now you get into a position that you struggle with despair, discouragement, doubt, disbelief. And before you know it, you're at depression. Like that. I've met so many people in my life that I've asked them, how did you find yourself here? And the steps that they found themselves are exactly the steps that I write about. And you know how I know? Because I've gone through them myself. We've all gone through them. So here's what I'm going to share with you. If you can identify when the battle is coming, there's two things you can do. Take a massive action so that you don't get into the battle. Because the best way you win the battle is just not to get into one. But we get sucked right into it immediately because we don't understand what those battles, what those signs look like. But once you're in it, you have to have a system that allows yourself to get out of the battle. There's no way that you'll ever be able to perform at your best as a parent, as a husband, as a spouse, as a wife, as a leader, in ministry. There's no way you, in your business, in your profession, it's very difficult to perform at your best at the level that you want to, at the level that you need to, if you're in a daily battle with something. So I tell folks, if you want to have something where if you want to perform at your best, let's figure out where you're falling short, let's figure out where your battle is, and let's get the heck out of it. In the book, I talk about invisible enemy defense system. We all have to have an invisible enemy defense system. That means as soon as we get into a challenge, as soon as we get into a battle, we have to figure out how do I get out of it and what can I do to fortify myself so that if I find myself in one, it doesn't damage me as much. Because in the end, if it damages you too much, you'll have a hard time being the best person, doing the best you can do at any level of activity. Let me encourage you to consider the following, and then I'm going to open up for some questions. There was a story of a guy that I knew. He was an AT&T worker in New York. I went to school with him. Good guy. I graduated from high school with this fellow. And I got a message. You know, it's funny, on Facebook these days, people post everything on Facebook, right? You can Facebook, boy, you can find out just about anything from anyone on Facebook these days. So he was on, there was a message on Facebook, and it was one of those messages that you don't want to read about someone who had passed away. And it was shocking. It was my classmate, played football together in high school. And I just seen him 6 months earlier. He lived in Westchester County. So when I went to the funeral, I found out what happened to him. It was in Vito. Good old Italian name from the Bronx, Vito. I said, what happened to Vito? Well, he hung himself. I said, what? But nobody saw that coming. He was having challenges with his ex-wife, having challenges with his son. His son was a young guy, and he would have visitations. But he had gotten pulled over for DWI. And as a result of that, in his own mind, he created a story that he would lose his job, lose his son, and parenting rights, and it overwhelmed him, and it festered in him for a few weeks to the point that it got the best of him. And he figured out, I guess in his own mind, that the best way to do it was just to take his own life. You never know who's in the struggle. You never know who's challenged. So I thought to myself as I wanted to bring this talk, hey, there's a lot of funny things I can talk about. I've got tons of talks that I give. But I think today, after the pandemic and people are trying to regain footing in life, that there's a lot more people struggling with these invisible enemies than I think they're willing to admit. And if I give a talk one day, or hand out a book one day, or you grab a book and you hand it to somebody one day that helps them get over the battle and saves that person from doing something that could very well be catastrophic, then that's the best talk I can ever give. I'll never know. I'm not on this side anyway. But I think that's the best talk I could ever give. And I'll give that for a while until it's time to do something a little bit better. Okay? So I'm open for any questions.
So how would you respond to the statement, if you stand for your principles, you'll have to fight sometimes. If you stand for nothing, you'll never have to worry about the battle?
Well, you know what, I think that's obviously true in a physical form, but I've learned that most people internally, from a psychological point, we're very quick to give in to battles. In other words, when times get too tough, we're very quick to give in. We can only fight for so long from an internal mental standpoint. So sometimes the best way to do is to identify when there's a battle coming around the corner. If you get up in the morning, you're dealing with something that is not right, something that you know is bugging you. The best thing to find out is to speak to someone, to have an internal talk and realize, okay, what is it exactly that I'm struggling with? Is it one of those battles? And then know how to get the heck out of it. Don't get into it. Because the end result is never good if the battle takes too much from you and if the battle is daily. And I'm talking about an internal battle. But that's a great question.
So you talk about not being able to say no. Talk about not being able to say no. What if you say yes and you find yourself in a situation where it's stressful, you're under a lot of pressure, these internal battles are happening? Is there a way that you can fight your way through that and still stay loyal to the thing that you committed to and survive it and thrive in that environment? Or do you have to ultimately say no to it and walk away and regroup?
There's a couple of things. That's a great question. Those are the battles that are big ones for guys that are and gals that are super ambitious, right? We're success driven. And we like to commit. We don't like to say no. Because by saying no, you think you're letting somebody down. That's really what it is. When you say no, you've convinced yourself that by saying no to somebody that you're letting somebody down, and we don't like to let people down, right? So first of all, the thing to recognize is, what is it that I'm going to, sort of like back in the answer, what is it that I'm not going to say yes anymore, even though I really, really want to? Because you may really want to say yes, but realistically, you just can't. Because the yes you give to someone is the no you give to somebody else. And what's more important? Yes to this and saying no to them. And yeah, I like to do that, but by saying yes to that, I'm taking time away from something that's way more important. So it takes a little bit of analyzing what's more important for me to invest my time in. But once you've made the commitment, then you've got to see it through, because to pull out can be even more hurtful than the person you committed to. So you just got to, like I tell my son, suck eggs and get it done. Get it done the best way you can, but learn for the next time. And I've been in those traps myself. I've had to say no sometimes because I've said yes before, and it's just created incredible pressure. So it's a tough one, but once you say yes, you got to stick with it. You just know better for the next time.
How did you stop battling your past demons? Where you're always like, do we feel like I owe them? I need to pay you back. You know, you never took me on your feet today because you're still beating yourself up over yesterday.
That's a great question. How do you deal with the past, right? How do you battle with demons from the past? Guys, I gotta tell you something. Everybody struggles with that. That's a struggle that doesn't go away. It's just a struggle that you have to know how to keep at bay. So I tell folks, it's not a struggle that goes away, it's a struggle you have to keep at bay. Here's what I can share with you. Understanding that your history doesn't determine your destiny. Your history should not determine your destiny. And what's happened in the past has happened in the past, and you cannot do anything about that. But here's what pulls you into tomorrow. Because that's the key. But what's your name, by the way? Cindy. Cindy, that's the key. The key is, what can I think about that pulls me into tomorrow? Because if you've got nothing that pulls you into tomorrow, your mind automatically is going to go back and look at the history. So understand, guys, from a psychological standpoint, your mind has to think about something. So it's either going to think about what's happened, or it's going to think about what's coming. And if you've got more about what's happened in the past, if your thoughts traffic to what's happened in the past because you're not focused or thinking about projecting or preparing for something that's coming, your mind will automatically open up the history books and remind you of all the good decisions and bad decisions that you've made. Especially when you're about to make another decision on something that's important, it'll always come back and remind you about the past mistake that you made on some other decision. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's a business, it's never going to relent on that. But you've got to find something positive that'll allow you to draw you into the future. I get up in the morning and I can easily think about all the things in my past, because we've all been there. But I choose to think about, what do I have happening tomorrow? What do I have happening today? What am I planning on that can pull me into something to help me feel better about my future? Because I can't do anything about the past. I can't do anything about past hurts. I can do a lot. There's a lot I can do about what's still yet to come. And it does become a nice remedy for that. In the book, I talk about actionable steps, guys, to physiologically change your state where you are, so you don't get caught in a trap. This morning, I did it coming up. The worst part about long drives in the morning, for me anyway, is that they're long drives in the morning, and that's when I'm susceptible. Right? So here's one of the things I'm going to show you. I'm going to put the mic down. This is so important. In the book, I talk about the invisible enemy defense system. You have to have a defense system. Every country has a defense system. When they see and they pick up on the potential attack or skirmish or something, there's an immediate defense system. When you see that you're going down a rabbit hole, your mind, if you're not in this protected mode, your mind can go there so fast. How many of you can turn a thought into a full-length feature film? Who can do that? We all have the ability to do that. A little trailer becomes a 4-hour movie. Like that, right? So you have to have something that snaps you out of it, because you can go into a lull. It's called a memory lull. Your body actually shuts down and your memory starts to play real fast. So here's a quick way to get out of that. Here's the defense system. When you start to see yourself going, slap yourself. Something. Just a clap. This morning when I was driving, and all of a sudden, it was still night, it's still dark, and I'm still thinking about things, and all of a sudden, snaps you right out. Something simple like that. It creates this energy, creates a synapse of fire, changes your trajectory. I'll give you another little one here. I walk around with little pieces of paper. Take a little piece of paper, roll it into a little ball. Whatever it is that's negative, whatever it is that's getting you down, we all got that. You have to identify it, by the way. Otherwise, you're delusional. Grab a little piece of paper, and I take 2 or 3 in my pocket. And in that little piece of paper, I think about all the things that are happening that I'm not crazy about, or the things that I know that can get to me. And I print the little piece, and I either put it in my pocket or I put it in my shirt pocket. And whenever I feel like I'm getting to that place, I take that little piece of paper, go like this. Flick it. Flick it. Because you know what you told your subconscious mind? I don't need that. I don't need to carry that. I don't need to deal with that.
And those little defense system mechanism, I'm telling you, it works in getting you back into a better place. Little things like that.
I got a question. So
We have
one more thing, just a thought. Sandy, you just brought up something that's really important. Is the rabbit hole. You start thinking about it past this day. There's something I've done to somebody that I really regret. You go down this rabbit hole, all of a sudden you're so wrapped up in it, you forget where you are. And that thought of put it on a piece of paper, thumbing that thing out, and just kind of get rid of that, focus on the future. I love that, dude. It's good stuff.
I want to wad up COVID.
Yeah, 2020.
Jay, it was a fantastic story. Any last questions that we have for Jay? It's a wonderful message, and thanks for tailoring it for us.
You have a book back there.
We have
Books back there for you to pick up.
We have a small gift for you that was actually made by one of our past presidents, Mr. Michael Obady, professor, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. Thank you. But would you be kind to pose for a quick photo for our website? And one side, please.
This way?
Yeah.
All right. Hallelujah.
Thank you so much, sir.
I appreciate you.
Have a great week.
Thank you, Joe.
So we'll see you.
All right.
Yes, absolutely.
Good morning. Happy to be here with you all. We'll be going in more regularly now. Finally, things are up to speed in what we're doing at the church. The gentleman next to me, he grew up in our church and now he's interning and we're hoping to bring him in on the staff. His name is Joshua Wahado. And you'll be seeing him around more often in our meetings. We want to be more involved in our community and see what we can do as a church to help our community as well.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for letting me be here, for inviting me. That's all. And I'm looking forward to bearing more. Thank you.
Thing and quick update, my wife and I were appointed as youth pastors. So there was no way in saying no to that. But when the Lord calls, we answer. And so we're now youth pastors at our church. And we've got some activities going on for our youth. And just to give you a heads up, I haven't decided whether I'm running or not. I'm just still letting the Lord guide me in that direction, whether we should ask me to run again or not. But in the meantime, I'm going to be right here.
What's the church name?
Templo Cristiano Agape. It's off of Pioneer and Story.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, sir. Well, we're going to go for a close, and if the good professor would please lead us in the four-way test.
Please stand up on that. Let's recite the forward test on the 10th routine of sale do. First,
Is it the truth?
second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
third,
Will it generally
fourth,
will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Good work, buddy. Come on, man. Great topic. Give me a
Yes, sir.
You need help, Mike?
No, I'll turn this on. Send me the picture whenever you get a chance. Just text me the picture.
Yeah, let me do it.
Just whenever, just to be with Good to see you, gentlemen. Great time today. Especially time of day. That's the main thing, man. You guys have fun. Yeah, man.
Huh? Yeah, good job.